Welcome to the October 10th, 2023 Planning Commission regular meeting. I'm Blanny Miller, Chair of the Commission. We have a bit of a long agenda today, so I would ask everyone to please be efficient in your comments and avoid redundancy so that we can hear from as many viewpoints on as many cases as possible today. We start every meeting with the opportunity for the public to comment on an item not contained on the agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item not contained on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. There's one item listed, rezoning case Z8421 at Millbrook Road. The recommended action is to defer this case to our October 24th meeting to allow the applicant additional time to consider revising conditions. Is there any debate or discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Commissioner Fox has seconded. All those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Is it 7? Yes, 7-0. Thank you. Now, moving on to committee reports. We have 4 items to review. The first is out of the Infrastructure and Mobility Committee. Committee Chair Bennett, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Infrastructure and Mobility met on September 28th. It was the second part of our discussion on green stormwater infrastructure and green infrastructure. We had stormwater staff give us a presentation about their activities related to green stormwater infrastructure. We also had representatives from Partners for Environmental Justice discuss GSI and green stormwater. We talked about how some of these techniques could be used in on rezoning cases in conditions. It was a good discussion, and I think we have, while there's a lot to be said about it, we concluded it after that meeting. So there's no action to be taken by Planning Commission. We just had a really good discussion. The presentations are both on the agenda. If you want to take a look at them, it was really informative.
Thank you. Those look very thorough. A lot of work went into those presentations. If you haven't gotten a chance to look at those, I would highly recommend it. They're great. And thank you to everyone who participated in the hard work creating those. Moving on to the next item, items D2 and D3, CP722 and Z9222, the New Bern Station Area Planning Study and rezoning of 744 properties along that corridor. These 2 items in the Committee of the Whole will receive a report from Committee Chair Rains, but before we do, Commissioner Fox has previously been recused from these 2 cases, and without objection, I will recuse her from these 2 items again today. Good, great. And with that, Committee Chair Rains, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Chair Fox. I'm going to keep this short for the 2 items on the Committee of the Whole. For the, just a quick update on CP 722 for the comp plan amendment. There's some information we requested from staff. We did have a scheduled meeting late September, which did not have a quorum, so unfortunately that meeting did not occur. And with the number of items we still have to discuss on this, I would like to make a motion to ask council to have a deadline of December 12th, 2023. This allows several special meetings and regular meetings in between that now and then to accomplish our review for this case. With that, so I'd like to make a motion to ask council for a December 12th deadline.
For both cases?
For CP 722.
Second.
Second.
There you
go. Okay, I guess, do I do the motion? Or?
Go for it.
So all in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Same thing for the rezoning Z9222 New Bern Stationary Planning for the 744 properties. Our last meeting, we were able to get through a small section, maybe a third of the properties for discussion. We still have quite a ways to go. So again, I'd like to have the same date. I'd like to have a motion for the same date, December 12th, 2023, to allow for further discussions in special and regular meetings from now until then. So I'd like to ask council for a new deadline of December 12th, 2023. All in favor?
Well, we have a
I'm
motion.
sorry.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Bennett has seconded. All those in favor?
All those in favor? All opposed? Approved. And that's all I have for these two cases for Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. May we cover some scheduling for those items as well? I believe Ira circulated a survey to look at everyone's schedules to see when we could achieve a quorum between now and then. We have 6 commissioners responding, and a few are still outstanding, so we were going to see if we could just live plan those meetings today. And I see Ira's here as well to assist us with that. Thank you.
I'm just here because calendars are hard, so. Yeah, so there's a slight preference for November the 29th, which is a Wednesday. November the 29th. I would also say November the 8th. Currently, there are 6 people who say they can attend. That date would give us, in addition to that special meeting, your 2 regular meetings in November, and then the one in December.
Yep.
If the November 29th, these are both Wednesdays, by the way. If the November 29th were to win, then that would just leave you the one meeting in December, should you choose to vote it out of committee and still discuss it as regular business.
I think on November 8th, we have 5 commissioners plus either you or me that's responded to the poll. So,
Right.
yeah, so it's 5 on the 8th. It would be helpful,
Versus 6 on the 29th, so.
yeah. Yep. But if you look at the people who have responded, only 5 of them are commissioners. Yeah. So it would be really helpful, Commissioners Bennett and Fox, to know your, I'm sorry, not Bennett, Lampman and Fox, to know your availability for the poll dates. Would you like Ira to resend that to you?
The 8th is a little challenging, the 29th is better for me.
I'm sorry, can you, I can't.
The 8th is a little challenging, the 29th
Yeah, that seems to be the,
Yep.
is what I can do.
yeah. The 29th is the Wednesday after Thanksgiving, if that's good context.
So you're both available the 29th? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. What about November 8th? We were talking about potentially trying to schedule 2 meetings, and if we don't need the second one, then we could defer. I know that Commissioner O'Haver said perhaps on the 8th he could attend the first portion but not the second, in case someone can only attend the second half of the 8th, November 8th, to still achieve a quorum. You can do November 8th? Great. Commissioner Lampman, is that,
She said that was difficult.
okay.
Yeah.
Can't do that one? Okay, cool. Well, it looks like we may have, well, we may not have a quorum. We have a quorum for half of the meeting, right? Okay, so we still need to hear from 2 other commissioners, so maybe, is that a maybe for November 8th?
You also-
And,
Yeah, you also need the extension from council, so,
yes,
yep.
okay. So maybe pencil in November 8th, but we may erase it in the future.
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and, Ira, if you would just send invitations to the commission so they can have a hold on calendars, I think that might be helpful.
Happy?
I heard Commissioner O'Haver at our last meeting, you asked, could we plan farther ahead? We were trying very hard to plan farther ahead. I know it makes it hard, scheduling is hard when it's last minute.
Thank you very much. Any other action on those 2 items? Seeing none, we'll move on to item D4, rezoning case Z9422 at Creedmoor Road. This case was also heard in the Committee of the Whole, but Committee Chair Raines was excused, and Commissioner Otwell chaired that meeting in his stead. So I will turn it over to Commissioner Otwell for this committee report.
Thank you, Chair Miller. On September 28th, we heard the zoning case for Z9422 for conversion from residential 4 R4 into mixed use RX4 conditional use. and we heard a presentation, and we heard comments from the public. The general consensus was that we were looking for a condition to ensure lighting along the pedestrian path to the school that is on the adjacent property. We also asked for examples of, what's the word I'm looking for, the driveway placement. So for the variance from the requirements for the state to put the driveways close together. And I believe that the applicant has included the conditions for the lighting and has examples ready. And I think we're going to hear a short update presentation from staff. There was some change on the staff presentation, but we'll get the feeling of the commission, I would suppose, if we need to hear that.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
All right, good morning. Hannah Reckow, Planning and Development. So as was mentioned, the request has been amended since it was last discussed, and I'll go over those changes. I will note that the version in the backup, that was the draft unsigned version, the applicant has since made some further edits in response to staff comment, and I'll make those clear. So these are the two modifications to the code requested with the PD that you saw at the committee meeting. They've added two more that pertain to streetscape requirements. So essentially these are clarifying that no streetscape would be required along the Brookhaven Drive frontage, which is sort of this west and southwest portion of the site. And then amendments to the other requirements, specifically section 6B in the narrative that relate to the pedestrian path. They've set a minimum width for that path and then specified that it would be lit both in the portion that's in the property and the portion in the public right-of-way, specifying bollard lighting for the right-of-way section and then tying it to certificate of occupancy. So those are all the changes to the case. Happy to answer questions.
I should also mention that the committee voted to recommend approval unanimously pending the receipt of the lighting conditions. Thank you.
Hannah, could you please provide the specific language to the revision?
Sure.
Do you want to read it?
Yes.
Okay,
I will
great.
do just
Thank
that.
you so much.
So in the narrative, section 6B now reads, a public pedestrian path, a minimum of 6 feet in width, shall be provided connecting Creedmoor Road right-of-way through the site to the Brookhaven Drive right-of-way, an existing sidewalk south of Manasseh Pope Lane. That portion of the pedestrian path located on the property shall be lit along its entire length. Bollard lighting shall be installed along the portion of the pedestrian path located within the public right-of-way. Both the pedestrian path and bollard lighting to be installed within the Brookhaven Drive and Manasseh Pope Lane rights-of-way shall be subject to an encroachment agreement provided by the Raleigh City Council. This requirement must be completed prior to the first certificate of occupancy issued to the property.
Thank you. So that has now been read into the record, so that satisfies our requirements. Thank you very much. Are there any other, is there any further discussion or debate on the merits of this case? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Fox?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval of Z9422 as it is reasonable and in the public interest, and I further move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated October 10, 2023, contained in the agenda material, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This amendment also includes an amendment to the future land use map to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. We have a second. Commissioner Otwell seconded. All those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously, 7-0. On to old business. There are three items today. For these items, we have previously received a full staff presentation and applicant presentation, and we have heard from the public. Our focus today will be on any changes or updates to the cases from our last meeting. The first item, E1, rezoning case Z1323 at Watkins Road. We first heard this case at our September 12th meeting, and the case was deferred until this meeting to allow the applicant time to submit revised conditions. I will now turn to Bronwyn Raidis for a brief presentation focusing on any updates since our last meeting.
Thanks. Good morning. Bronwyn Raidis with Planning and Development. Again, this case is located along Watkins Road. The request is to rezone approximately 35 acres from R4 and Wake County R30 to R6 CU. So there have been a couple of changes to the request since you last saw it. The applicant has provided a couple of new conditions. Just a refresher, these are the conditions that you saw before. The first, prohibiting cemeteries. The second, establishing a trip budget. And then these are the new conditions. So the following would apply to a Tier 3 site plan only. The first being that 20% of the net site area shall be designated as open area, and then the second being that the applicant would make, or the property owner would make a contribution to the City of Raleigh Fire Department of $10,000. And I'll just note really quickly that there was a staff recommended kind of clerical correction to 3A, just changing open area to open space, consistent with the UDO language. But those are the changes that have happened since September 12th. And I know we have a lot on the agenda today, so I will go ahead and ask if you have any questions for me before we invite the applicant up.
Thank you very much. Before we do that, I'll just double check. We have already received public comment on this case, but just so I can get a sense, by show of hands, is there anyone here today who wishes to speak on the proposed changes or on any other aspect of this case that was not discussed previously? We see 2 or 3, okay. In that case, I will open up 5 minutes to each side for additional comments. Thank you. So moving on to public comment, the applicant and those in favor will have a total of 5 additional minutes to speak. And again, we would ask that comments focus on changes and new comments that we have not previously heard before. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission, Samuel Morris with Longleaf Law Partners, 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302, here on behalf of the applicant. We are here coming back to you all on a rezoning of this 3-parcel assemblage located on Watkins Road, seeking to go to R6. As you heard, parcels are zoned R4 and R30, and the assemblage is designated as low-scale residential on the future land use map. It's located adjacent to the Raleigh Municipal Corporate Jurisdiction on 2 sides, and the property is also located on multiple sides by the ETJ. We did want to, again, point out the location of this property in proximity to the ETJ, and that we've been looking into exactly why the ETJ was not expanded onto this specific property, despite the fact that it was expanded on multiple sides. It was a policy of the city back in the day during some of these expansions to give large farm and agricultural owners the opportunity to opt out. We can't confirm that that was the case here, but we think it's quite likely that this large property opted out of an ETJ expansion opportunity, just given, of course, the context around it. Why would multiple parcels located further from the city be included in that expansion, but not this property? And based on our last meeting, there were 2 main issues that were brought up. One is the fire response time, and the other was broader concerns about walkability and kind of community amenity areas. So we've included the $10,000 contribution to the Future Fire Fund. This is a new condition that cases are working out exactly what it's going to look like. It's a newly identified issue. I know that the city attorney's office has workshopped maybe one condition like this in the past. So as of right now, we understand there are further conversations to have, but wanted to include this as our kind of show of good faith that we do intend to work with the city and make an appropriate contribution to that fire fund, as the city council has indicated they'd like to see for these cases. And then regarding kind of walkability, community amenity, we've imposed a 20% open area requirement. That's in addition to the TCA, there's a 10% TCA requirement. So this effectively bumps that up to a 20% requirement, not purely TCA, but that extra 10% would be, it could be your typical kind of HOA, active recreation, or some type of green space, but it cannot be a developable lot, a right-of-way, et cetera. So it essentially requires you to follow something very similar to a compact development pattern on the property. And so just with that, we'd note that, it's very difficult to solve each one of these issues that have been identified on a single parcel or a single assemblage. But we've included both of these kind of as a show of our effort to solve those issues to the best of our ability as we can on an individual parcel. And so with that, I'll save the last few moments for we have someone to speak in support, I believe. So I'll hand the over to them.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? If so, please come to the podium.
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. Then moving on to those in opposition, anyone opposed to this case, please come to the podium. You have a total of 5 minutes to speak.
Good morning. I'm Billy Jo Spencer, and I reside at 4331 Watkins Road, which is my home, and then there's the farm home, and then the property that is in question and discussion about the subdivision. We've talked previously about safety and concerns. There is safety concerns as far as walking. We are not opposed of the single-family housing, but we are opposed of apartments, condominiums being built there, as well as the safety, fire department, as we were just heard from. Also, I'm speaking on behalf of the Wake Crossroads Lake Pond. I am a member of that pond. It is shareholders. We have 35 members, and we have a concern with liability. Kids, the pond is there. I don't know if there's any consideration of there being fencing. It is a stock pond. It is privately owned, so therefore it's not open to the public for fishing, canoeing, ice skating, as we've had some teenagers out doing and had to run over or run out in the wintertime. So we are concerned with that as well. However, again, my family is not opposed to the single housing family, but we are, again, opposed of the apartments and condominiums. I'll just mention with safety, yesterday, my father lives across the road. I tried to cross the road 5 o'clock, where people coming and going from work, and I had to wait. I counted, there were 10 cars that went past me just at that time of day. We don't even allow him to go get his mail because he would have to cross the road. There is a Hunt's Landscaping right down the road from us, and so it's continuously landscaping vehicles up and down the road. My husband relocated our mailbox yesterday back from our property because it has been hit multiple times just last week, and they don't stop. They keep going. So there is some concern with, families, children walking on that property. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in opposition to this project? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the table for questions and comments from our commissioners. Commissioner Raines? Vice Chair Raines, excuse me.
Thanks, Chair Miller. Just a quick question on the contribution for the fire fund. Is this, it was noted by the applicant that this is something that's council is interested in? Is this common practice, and how is this actually applied for this region or specific project? I'm just not familiar with how this is applicable.
Sure. So there are areas of our ETJ and properties outside our ETJ adjacent to corporate limits that are eligible for annexation, but we know that there are fire service issues in those areas, either response time or type of equipment available. The fire department has issued a RFP to secure planning services to expand fire service in the ETJ and also consider areas adjacent to corporate limits. Responses are due in December. In the interim, requests in those areas are flagged as there are fire service issues there, right? That's a policy issue that you need to be aware of as you consider these requests. And in response, we are seeing applicants offer contributions to fire service funding through zoning conditions. They are arriving at their, in an effort to respond to that policy. Typically, we are not finding them consistent when they are making that contribution. It's the scale of contribution is not really in line with the scale of problem, and frankly, an individual applicant cannot really move the needle on that, right? There's no expectation that they would. But I think they are offering as a gesture. And then different folks are calculating, making a decision about that amount on different things. Sometimes we see it based on number of units, sometimes based on number of acres, really varies from applicant to applicant, but they all have expressed to us that they have a method. It just varies from case to case.
Thank you.
Yeah.
May I follow up on that?
Please.
Had the city contemplated a development agreement to achieve increases in their fire infrastructure? I know that's a pretty common tool used elsewhere.
I don't think of a development agreement as something that the city initiates. That's usually raised by a property owner who's trying to offer and receive.
Okay. The city does have the development agreement policy now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, that's
It's
good.
it's in the code. We've seen one executed already. A request that you saw early this year, late last year for Oak Hill Court.
Okay.
And there are others pending.
Okay. So the city might be receptive to that as a solution in the future.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments and questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. So my primary concern, can't really be addressed through either of these new conditions, although I appreciate the addition of the conditions. My primary concern was the location of the rezoning, the fact that it's in a car-dependent area, pretty much isolated from employment and shopping, and that it's in, the largest parcel is in the Northeast Special Study Area, which recommends additional study to determine how parcels in that area will be developed. And as I understand it, that's not going to begin until next year, that study. So the two conditions that have been added don't address that issue for me. So I am still not in support of this. I think the study needs to happen first to determine how the parcels in this area should be developed. Okay. That's it. That's it for me.
Thank you. Other thoughts from the commissioners? Commissioner Albo.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I agree with Commissioner Bennett. I have issues stretching the city this far, but I'm really torn because if this were to get developed under current zoning, I think we would have an even less desirable outcome. And perhaps staff could clarify something for me. were this to be rezoned, were the request to be granted, and then the study area comes in and makes recommendations, what are those recommendations likely to include, and what would be the impact on a parcel like this? Is it just future land use considerations? So if the zoning's already happened, then it really does have no impact, or are there other kinds of considerations that should be considered?
I would encourage you to think about the Southeast Special Study that we just reviewed. This area is, I would say, similarly situated in its proximity to corporate limits and services. It's also similarly situated in that it has long been, parts of it have long been considered our short-range urban service area, places where we would eventually provide service, as well as our long-range. There's just a time frame difference there. And if you think about the recommendations that came out of the Southeast study, we did see some future land use map designation changes. We saw some urban form map changes, which are actually relevant to a case you'll see later today. Ultimately, the council recommended authorized staff to pursue ETJ expansion of the most proximate area, which would make those areas eligible for annexation, newly eligible for annexation. And then what will happen as a result of that is that the city will rezone those properties when they're brought into the ETJ. We would have the opportunity to set sort of the baseline zoning. And part of the work that we will do in that effort is to establish an overlay which would prioritize clustered development and preservation of open space. So you would see regulation for residential and commercial development that also prioritized clustering greater density in nodes to leave room for longer-term preservation of open space, green space, akin to our conservation development option, but perhaps more effective. That project also brought forward advice to revise the conservation development option because it is not often utilized.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Given any other questions, comments from commissioners at this time? Given those concerns from the commissioners, does the applicant wish to respond to any of those particular concerns related to the proximity to services and the forthcoming special study area, Northeast Special Study area study?
Sure. Well, just a couple comments about, the area study. Of course, as you mentioned, it's just the one parcel, larger parcel that is included in that area study due to the fact that it is not in the ETJ. That's why it's included in the study. And as we talked about, it's sort of a peculiar, just looking at the map, why, in fact, it's not included in the ETJ. If I may just put up this map here just to show you all as well. If you can see the sewer line running through the property, that was a major capital improvement project that was done by the city of Raleigh in 2002 to run sewer. This was shortly after these developments on the left side of Watkins Road came online. So you see the ETJ tracking that sewer line expansion. So again, we think that that taking that into consideration is important. Another note is that the area study has been this area was designated for that study over 14 years ago, and nothing has happened in the interim, so that we do appreciate that it's supposed to happen next year. I think that there's been plans for it to get underway multiple times in the past, and it's hard for a property to just sit and wait. So understanding that it's been kind of waiting for over a decade for this study, and in the context of the fact that it is so close to the ETJ on all sides and does have sewer available by gravity, no pumps needed. There's water along Watkins Road. We think that, although there is this area study that looks at large-scale ETJ expansions, and despite the fact that that large-scale ETJ expansion hasn't come online yet, doesn't disqualify an individual property that is very uniquely situated from kind of meeting those eligibility requirements, which is sewer and water's availability, adjacent to existing municipal jurisdiction. We think we really hit all those and meet the criteria for an exception to that kind of general rule that we wait until the study gets done. So just wanted to point out those unique aspects of this property in the context of the study. Thank you.
Thank you. Any follow-up from commissioners? Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I just have a quick comment. One of my biggest problems with annexing properties and parcels this far out is the concern about revenue and whether adding those parcels to our city is revenue positive or negative. And that was one of the measures that came out of the Southeast study area, was that there was a prediction of positive or negative revenue for different options as part of that study. I feel like low-density development often doesn't pay for its own infrastructure and maintenance over long term, but the infrastructure already exists here, and the maintenance is already going to be there for the sewer line, for the water line. The road's going to be there, and it's going to be improved because of the development already happening out there. I think I'm going to be inclined to support this measure.
Thank you. Other comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
I guess now that I said that. So I'd like to recommend approval of zoning case Z1323, and I didn't bring my language up. It is in where is my consistency statement? My cheat sheet, thank you. Contained in the agenda material, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This also includes an amendment to the 2030 comprehensive plan to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fox, it's seconded. Any further debate or discussion on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-1. Thank you very much. Moving on to item E2, rezoning case Z2123 at 1501 Kirkland Road. We first heard this case at our September 26th meeting, and the case was deferred to allow the applicant time to submit revised conditions to address the lack of a frontage. I will now turn to Hannah Reckow for a brief staff presentation focusing on any updates since our last meeting.
Good morning. So the request has been amended. Previously was a general use request. Now is a conditional use request with two conditions. One prohibiting on-site vehicle surface parking between any buildings and Kirkland Road, and another specifying that the unit closest to Kirkland Road will have a primary street-facing pedestrian entrance. So these addition of these conditions did increase consistency with policies around frontage, since they speak to two major aspects of an urban frontage. And that concludes the staff update.
Thank you very much. We have already received public comment on this case, but so I can get a sense, by show of hands, is there anyone here today who would like to speak on any of the proposed changes or any other aspect of this case that was not previously discussed? Seeing none, I will bring this item back to the table. Any questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to thank the applicant for providing those conditions that we requested, and I'd like to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. And again, I was just going to comment. I think the applicant addressed the concerns that the council, the commission had, so I appreciate that. So, excuse me. Knowing that, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated October 10, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment Z2123.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Raines has seconded. Any further discussion or debate on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, by show of hands, all those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Moving on to old business item E3, Z2223 at Trailwood Drive. We first heard this case at our September 26th meeting, but did not have time to conclude our discussion. The case was deferred to this meeting to allow for additional discussion and potential amendments to the request. Last week, the applicant provided draft changes to the conditions. I will now turn to Bronwyn Radis for a brief staff presentation focusing on any updates since our last meeting, including the status of those draft condition changes.
Good morning again. Bronwyn Radis, Planning and Development. So just a refresher on the site. This is 1000 and 1100 Trailwood Drive, located in West Raleigh. The request is to rezone approximately 11 acres from planned development with the Special Residential Parking Overlay District to R6 conditional use with the Special Residential Parking Overlay District. So there have been new zoning conditions added. Here are the conditions that you already saw. The first being that a cap on residential units set at 40 units, and then a construction of a privately maintained multi-use path connecting the future development up north to the existing greenway that's on the site today. And here are those new conditions that have been added since the last meeting. So condition number 3 sets aside a minimum of 6 acres of the site to remain undisturbed, except for access easements, greenway easements, or utility easements. Setting a minimum 40-foot building setback along the property line shared with 116 Trailwood Drive, and that's that property directly adjacent to the south. And then along that same property line, providing a landscaped buffer area, which has been provided as an exhibit, which I'll show you in a following slide. And then the final condition, adding a commitment to utilizing 1 green stormwater measure on any Tier 3 site plan. And here is that exhibit showing the planting plan. And the exhibit you saw previously with the greenway extension. And the applicant has provided signed conditions since the draft conditions were provided. Some changes include adding more specific options for the green stormwater infrastructure methods that they could use. And I don't have those on the slides today, but I'm happy to kind of read them out if they need to be read out for the details. All right. And the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan overall, consistent with the future land use map. And do you have any questions for me before we kind of open up for discussion?
Thank you very much. Before we turn to questions, I just want to get a sense by show of hands, is there anyone here in the public who would like to speak about any of the changes or the proposed changes or any other aspect of this case that was not previously discussed? Seeing a few, I'd like to open up the discussion to the public and grant 5 minutes for each side, starting off with the applicant and those in favor. You have a total of 5 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Mac Paul, Morningstar Law, 421 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of Benita Mittal, owners of the 2 properties. Just real briefly, you may recall at the last discussion, the conditions that were originally submitted brought us into consistency with every single comprehensive plan policy. But some of the feedback we heard at the table, number 1, would we consider some additional commitment to the buffer that we discussed? We had been asked by the community to really go deep down into the design of this. You may remember Ted Van Dyke, he's traveling today, but he showed some fairly detailed renderings based on tree survey, environmental studies, grading plans. So went a long way to do almost a site plan for this, for a townhome development at this location, as well as reducing the density to a low density, low scale density. This site is one of the few parcels along Trailwood that's not in an NCOD, and it is in closest proximity to Avon Ferry, which is a transit corridor, and yet you have Walnut Creek nearby. So the development on this site, to the extent it can be developed, is toward the south, which is in the closest proximity to the adjacent neighbors. So essentially what we've done is we've added a couple of conditions about additional setback, which has been a concern, 8 times what the zoning would require at 40 feet, as well as a tree planting. There are a lot of really nice mature trees along the border, but they're deciduous, so these evergreen plantings would be done somewhere in the 40 feet and provide some opaque buffering during the winter months, as discussed. We also heard some feedback from staff about the nearby greenway and the creek and additional protections. So we've committed to over 50% of the site being undisturbed, as well as, and I didn't anticipate the committee report on GSI, but we have come up with a couple of interesting conditions or options related to permeable pavement to a certain standard, as well as bioretention, again, to a very specific standard that Daniel Watley here with Withers could explain if you have an interest. And the one other thing that wasn't mentioned, Commissioner Reeves asked if we'd make that greenway publicly accessible, which we did do in our conditions. There was some discussion about a fence. We did not include a fence. If it's needed for engineering purposes or safety, that would be included in the development. One of the concerns of the neighbors is the placement of the driveway, and essentially, we've just said, we can't reduce the requirements of the city. Certainly at site plan, we'll have feedback and we'll follow what the transportation staff says as far as spacing is concerned. So I know the neighbors, we've said we'll continue to discuss with them, and they still would like some more buffering. But we feel like, given that this is low-density residential against residential, we've tried to find a reasonable medium there to allow the development to occur where it naturally would occur and provide some reasonable buffering. So with that, turn it over to y'all if you have any questions.
We may turn back to questions once we bring the discussion back to the table. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in favor of this project? Seeing none, I'll move on to the opposition. Those opposed have a total of 5 minutes to speak. And please introduce yourself when you come to the table as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Shannon Beard. My wife was here previously. We own 1116 Trailwood Drive, directly adjacent to this property. I'd like to speak to some of the conditions that were added. I don't believe these reflect the neighborhood meetings, the concerns that have been raised specifically in prior discussions. Specifically, I know that they have roof decks that are overlooking our property. They will literally be able to see inside my house at night. The setbacks that we previously discussed specifically were undisturbed because the character of the neighborhood is a canopy. And if you clear cut, and you take away half that canopy, it has a significant impact. A 20-foot buffer, we did want an additional buffer because we have trees that are over 100 feet tall. Those have gigantic root balls, and if they grade within 10 to 20, well, actually 10 to 5 feet, depending on where those trees are, then it's going to kill that side of the root structure, and those trees are going to fall. So you can say that you're preserving them, but they will still fall. These are what we've asked for in other, I won't go into the details, but it's what in previous developments they were willing to put into writing. Sorry.
Thank you. Was that a total of 5 minutes? No. I didn't.
Maintaining 6 acres of undisturbed land is very easy when it's wetland that can't be built on. So I don't really see that as a concession. An undisturbed section that we would like to see is a little bit more setback from the road, a little bit more setback from the adjoining properties. And I guess that's all I have.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to speak in opposition of this project? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the table. Questions and comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. My question is for stormwater staff. There's a comment about making the case more consistent with policy EP 4.2. Is there an issue with this rezoning having fill in the floodplain?
There is currently nothing, Sally Hoyt, Raleigh Stormwater. There is currently nothing prohibiting the project from placing fill or buildings in the floodplain. It would require either a no impact study or a letter of map revision. But based on the sketch plan that was submitted to the city for a scoping meeting, it looks like fill is planned in the floodplain.
Would the applicant care to address that? Would you consider not adding a condition to not place fill or anything else in the floodplain?
Let me see if I can. So there is like a little spot right there that and Daniel Watley is here, as I mentioned. There has been a no-rise study completed showing that that little corner could be filled without any rise in the floodplain. So, obviously it would have an impact also on stormwater detention if we were not able to do that. That is certainly a code requirement. I mean, we did have a text change a couple of years about floodplain protection, and so there are certain provisions like a no-rise study. We're trying to be mindful of this development, going above and beyond what might be required for stormwater with our conditions, but we would like to have the flexibility. If the study bears out, it's got to be approved, and there's a whole process with the city that would determine whether that could be done or not done under the UDO.
Thank you. Other comments and questions? Commissioner Haber.
I think this is a question for the applicant, and maybe I missed it, but looking in the materials, my understanding is that they've increased that rear building setback, which is adjacent to 1116 Trailwood, to 40 feet. Is there an exhibit that shows that? I think the one that's in there still shows the 20-foot, or did I misunderstand what the revised condition is?
There was a request last week when we submitted the conditions with the tree planting to not use the exhibit, but to actually put the planting standard in the verbiage of the condition. So that was done. So there's no longer an exhibit. And so as the condition expressly states that the setback is 40 feet, which again is further than the existing zoning and certainly from the R6 standard. So does that make sense?
It does. It looks like it will have an impact on that site plan if you move that 20-foot rear building setback to 40 feet. So I just want to make sure I understand.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, based on this plan, it is, it's 40 or a little over 40 feet back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so we were planning for that. And that was part of these conversations. The challenge has been, we've had lots of meetings and been a very good dialogue, but trying to pinpoint, like, if these 5 things are done, will that satisfy all the issues, or there's still some things out there that are lurking? But that was something we've been planning for.
Thank you. Other comments? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Okay. Similarly to the last case, I'll try to be consistent. I think the applicant has gone back and addressed the concerns we had. I certainly understand the neighbors' concerns. I've got similar situation occurring at my house, but I think it's a good plan, and I appreciate the additional protections that the applicant has offered So I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated September 26, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment Z2223.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Commissioner Lampman has seconded. Any further discussion or debates on the merits of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much.
As mentioned, if I may be excused. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to new business. These requests have not appeared on a previous Planning Commission agenda, so we will hear a full staff presentation and applicant presentation, and we will hear from the public. The first item is case F1, rezoning case Z2423 at 5100 Forestville Road. This case is to change approximately 1.42 acres from OX3 conditional use to CX3. The deadline for action is November 25th, and we will turn to Hannah Reckow for a presentation from city planning staff.
Good morning. So this is a request to rezone a small portion of 5100 Forestville Road that is currently split zoned with OX3 conditional use to CX3. You can see the fragments of this parcel that are included in the request, sort of along the western and southern sides of the property. This area at Buffalo Road and Forestville Road, there's a kind of a cluster of mixed-use districts. And then you can see that its location is east of I-540. Generally open land uses and residential in this area. You can see the site is currently undeveloped. And as I mentioned, the requested district is conditional use, just CX3, so there's no proposed zoning conditions. Here and in the staff report, the analysis of build-out looks at the whole parcel, the whole 25-acre parcel, and not just the fragments. It didn't seem like a reasonable assumption to just look at those. Basically, little to no change between existing and proposed entitlement on the site. This site has a lower walk, transit, and bike score than the city average, and is generally in the process of seeing more development. So its proximity to other destinations, I think, is affecting that transportation cost and job proximity scores. Little to no impact on housing supply in the proposed zoning, although it would, as a mixed-use district, continue to permit a variety of housing types and small unit and lot sizes, and is not within walking distance of transit. The census tract that this site is located in, residents are more likely than the city average to be racial minorities or to be low income, and the median rent has increased, but at a similar rate to the city average overall. Future land use map designation for this site is community mixed use. CX3 is consistent with that designation. There's no urban form guidance for the site, and the request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Some consistent policies listed here, and no identified inconsistent policies. And then your deadline for action is later next month. So with that, I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Moving on to public comment. The applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'm Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602, here today representing Heprol LLC, the owner of this property. And here with me today is Carla Kassebaum, who is a representative of Harris Development, who is the on-the-ground developer. Heprol is in a different location, but Carla is the point person for this development. As Hannah indicated, this is I call it a cleanup zoning. there's a couple of fragments of this larger 25-acre parcel that for some reason were not zoned with the balance of the parcel. And there are those couple pieces along the roadway, the future roadway, that really are not, that's going to be a roadway anyway. So the key thing is this little triangular piece right here. And the idea is to conform the zoning on the little triangular piece with the balance of the tract. So that then that'll be an out parcel tract, so that that parcel will have one consistent zoning. It is consistent with the future land use map. So the request is to rezone these slivers to from OX3CU with SHOD 1 to CX3 with SHOD 1. Just get rid of the zoning inconsistency. We want to match the zoning for the balance of the tract. The remainder of the tract is currently under development. They're about to pull permits as a public shopping center. This is a general use case, which means no conditions. And the reason for that is that we would have matched the conditions that exist on the balance of the tract. And there are several conditions, but all of those conditions deal with right-of-way improvements, and there was one about utility connections. Well, the public's development is going to ensure that all those right-of-way conditions are met and then some, and the utilities are connected. So those conditions become sort of irrelevant because they're already going to be satisfied. And so it just didn't seem to make sense to add those same conditions, which will be satisfied. The development of the public center is going to be a big development with massive road improvements. I want to show you the site plan, and it includes the public store and then multiple out parcels. It's a lot of road improvements along the frontage of Buffalo and Forestville, and then this entire loop road is a new road being built by this developer. So I think I was talking to my client, and she said that this is over $8 million in road improvements for this development. So we think it's a significant contribution, road and utility improvements. And the other thing important to note about this general area is there's a huge amount of new residential units coming to this area. I think we calculated, and this is very rough, because some of the proposals, we don't know what the numbers, but close to 2,000 residential units in development right now in the process somewhere. So it's going to be significant, and we believe this center will add a great amenity to the new residents with lots of goods and services, and primarily a grocery store, which they desperately need. And this will allow this one out parcel over here, lot 4, to be developed in a way that makes sense. They don't have to worry about two zonings when they're just really, you can see the little line right there that splits the zoning. So just if you wanted to see what the conditions were on the old case, their access will be in accordance with NCDOT, utilize the standards of the SHOD, which we have to do. If a package treatment plant is used, well, we're not going to do that. We're connecting to city utilities, reserving not necessary right-of-way along Buffalo Road. We're certainly reserving a lot of right-of-way. The next one's additional right-of-way, and then they just go on and on about right-of-way things, and we're doing all of that and more. So in summary, this is a general use case. The existing conditions on the adjacent property have been or will be satisfied with this public's development, and it's very close to pulling permits. We've been working through the ASR and SPR processes, and we're expecting to have the plat recorded within the next couple of weeks, we hope. It is comprehensive. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. I believe it's reasonable in the public interest. It cleans up a zoning inconsistency. And with that, we would appreciate your support. Certainly available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll move on to the opposition. Those opposed to this case will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. Then, seeing none, we will bring it back to the table. Do we have questions and comments from the commissioners? Or no questions? questions for the applicant? Then with that, I would like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Bennett.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated October 10th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. The action taken is reasonable and in the public interest because the request is in line with the future land use map recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Raines has seconded. All those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, F2, rezoning case Z2623 at Glenwood Avenue. This case is to change approximately 1.69 acres from a variety of 3-story DX and OX zoning districts to downtown mixed-use 20 stories, urban limited frontage with the conditional use. We will now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from city planning staff.
Good morning, Planning Commission members. My name is Matthew Burns with Planning and Development. The case before you is Z2623, located at 301 Glenwood Avenue, 617 West North Street, and 612 West Lane Street. There are several existing zoning districts in the area of request. At 301 Glenwood Avenue, you have DX3 with shopfront frontage, OX3 detached, conditional use, OX3 detached with NCOD, and OX3 detached conditional use with NCOD. And both 617 West North Street and 612 West Lane Street have office mixed use 3 stories detached with NCOD as well. The applicant's requesting downtown mixed use 20 stories, urban limited frontage, conditional use. The area of request is partially within the North Boylan NCOD. The West Street and Lane Street parcels are entirely within the North Boylan NCOD, whereas the Glenwood Avenue parcel is partially within the North Boylan NCOD. And the request would remove this NCOD from the site. The area of request is also partially within a downtown transition area, and the deadline for this request is November 25th, 2023. Zoning in the area is primarily mixed use. Parcels to the north of the site, which include the Gramercy apartment complex, are commercial. Parcels to the east of the site are zoned downtown mixed use 7 stories with shopfront frontage, and downtown mixed use 40 stories with shopfront frontage and as a conditional use. And then to the south is mostly office mixed use with some downtown mixed use. And to the west is mostly office mixed use as well. The closest compatible zoning districts would be downtown mixed use 40 stories to the east or downtown mixed use 20 stories. The site area is located between downtown commercial uses on Glenwood Avenue at the east part of the site and institutional and office uses in the North Boylan neighborhood, the west part of the site. Many of the existing institutional and office uses are mid-century homes that have been converted to office uses. The Smoky Hollow development and Publix are located northeast of the site. There is a BRT station proposed near the intersection of Peace Street and Capitol Boulevard. The location will be finalized upon completion of the North Wake BRT major investment study, which is currently ongoing. As mentioned, immediately north are the Gramercy apartments, which include the Glenwood South Pharmacy and Market at street level. And northeast of the site, on the same block, is the Hibernian Bar and Pub. Then northeast is also the Creamery development, which includes Milk Bar. Southeast are the 222 Glenwood condos. On the same block as the request, southwest and adjacent, on the corner of West Lane and Boylan, are law office and rental property. There are a variety of uses and businesses on site. There are existing condos at the intersection of West North and Boylan, which were built in 1984. The Lane Street parcel is currently a landscape architecture office. The Glenwood Avenue parcel is split between a parking lot and the Glenwood Center, which has several restaurants, including Plate's Neighborhood Kitchen, Sushi Blues, and Typhoon Bistro. Here are a few views of the request. At the top left, you can see the existing Glenwood Center, and as well as the Gramercy kind of behind it. And the other views show the existing condos, that's the bottom left, and the top right shows the law office, and bottom right shows the parking lot. The applicant is offering 3 conditions. The first prohibits some uses that are normally allowed in DX. The second says the property owner will dedicate an easement large enough to accommodate an 8-dock bike share station if requested by City of Raleigh. And the third condition indicates that one public art installation shall be provided on site. The requested zoning district would significantly increase entitlement on site, including increasing the max number of residential units, the max office gross square footage, and the max gross retail square footage. It would also change the build-to requirements for portions of the site. The area of request shown in violet is partially within both the downtown transition area, indicated in solid blue, and the North Boylan Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, indicated in a yellow hatch. As I mentioned, it's split. Part of the area of request is entirely within the North Boylan and COD and the transition area, whereas other parts, in particular, the Glenwood Avenue parcel, is partially within both. The overall purpose of downtown transition zones is to manage change between areas of different development intensity, accomplished through controls of uses, scale, height, and building materials. The existing North Boylan and COD extends west and south and would be removed as part of this rezoning request. Per the UDO, the North Boylan COD currently establishes average front yard setbacks, requires buildings, and their primary interest is to be oriented toward public streets, limits building height to 24 feet or a maximum of 40 with specific roof pitches, and requires building facade offsets and limits vehicular surface areas. Removing the NCOD would allow for taller structures to be built in the area of request and allow for retail and commercial uses on site. Compared to citywide averages, the area of request is highly walkable to office buildings, restaurants, and public realm amenities along Glenwood and nearby streets. It's served by an above-average number of public transit routes. It's located close to existing bike infrastructure, has a very low cost of transportation, and is very close to existing employment centers. The area is served by Go Raleigh Route 6 and is close to 3 transit stops on Glenwood Avenue. It's also within walking distance of routes 8 and 16, as well as the proposed BRT station planned for Peace and Capitol Boulevard. The request would allow for taller maximum building height, 20 stories, and a more intense mix of residential, office, and commercial uses. It would add to the housing supply, permit a variety of housing types, and allow smaller units, but the proposed conditions do not include subsidized units. Residents on site are less likely to be low income or people of color than city average. Housing costs have increased over 65% within the site's census tract since 2016, which is higher than the citywide average of 25%. The site has 2 future land use map designations. It is inconsistent with the office and residential mixed use future land use map category. The requested zoning district and height would encourage more intensive development, which would provide more housing options, more efficient use of infrastructure, and energy efficiency in an area close to existing and planned public transit. The request is similar to other recent nearby rezoning requests and overall in line with current development trends in downtown Raleigh. The request is consistent with the urban form map as it includes urban limited frontage. Urban frontages are recommended in downtown areas. Development would be located within 20 feet of the street and would need to fill significant street frontage. No on-site parking or vehicular surface area is permitted between the building and the street. As far as compatibility, properties to the north and east feature urban, general, and shopfront frontage. Properties to the south and west primarily feature detached structures. The request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. Although the request is inconsistent with part of the site's future land use map guidance for office and residential mixed use, it is consistent with the central business district portion of the flume and the urban form map. It is also consistent with various policies related to higher intensity and more compact development, as well as urban design guidelines. Staff identified 14 comprehensive plan policies consistent with the request. The first 7 shown here generally concern higher intensity and more compact development, development near existing and planned transit stations, and urban pattern and frontage. The next 7 shown here generally concern higher density development and vertical mixed use, public realm amenities, open space, and public art, and reducing emissions. Staff identified 3 comprehensive plan policies inconsistent with the request, which are related to future land use map and zoning consistency and downtown edges / transition areas. The deadline for action is November 25th, 2023, and there are no outstanding issues with the request. Since the request is inconsistent with the future land use map, approval would amend the map areas from office and residential mixed use to central business district. So these would change from blue to red. And the applicant is here to answer any questions, and I'm here to answer any questions too.
Thank you very much. Moving on to public comment, the applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Mac Paul here on behalf of Blue Ridge Realty, owner of this site. You may be familiar with Blue Ridge. They're a local developer and they have a lot of experience in the Glenwood South corridor, having done Gramercy, also development out on Blue Ridge, and have been noted for some of the developments they've done over the years. One of the things to note about the site, it's a large assemblage. You don't have that many opportunities on Glenwood South to aggregate this much acreage in a key corridor. You also heard about Glenwood Center. Just as a little bit of a historical note, that really is the scene of a crime in the planning department, because before we made a lot of the changes, in more recent years, when that development was done, it was required to be pushed back with parking, surface parking between the building and the street. And that really raised attention to some of the challenges we had, and I think led to the pedestrian business overlay district and the urban form that we've really been moving toward. But now that's been used for outdoor seating, so it's at least been able to be adapted over the years. So if you look at some of the zoning in the nearby area, 40 stories across the street, across to the east on Glenwood, you now have some 12-story zoning to the west between Boylan and St. Mary's. So this case really is about, I think primarily, and obviously we're here to get your feedback, as far as the policies in the comprehensive plan, it really is about the transition. And we've already heard, you guys have heard a number of cases dealing with NCOD, the North Boylan. I think that's pretty well established that it doesn't quite have the validity that it did when it was originally created, so a number of those NCODs have been removed. Highest walk score in the city here in this area, right on the transit area in the heart of the Central Business District. These are some of the conditions that the Planning Commission has tended to ask for in urban and downtown rezonings recently with respect to public art and bike share, so wanted to get ahead of that. So again, really the only the policy comments about edge areas, it's not within 150 feet of low-density residential. Surrounding it are all businesses and higher density. This just shows that the houses in the area are businesses. And then the downtown edges. This really is another policy from not the NCOD, but downtown edges, adjacent between Central Business District and adjacent residential district. There is no adjacent residential district. You can see that we have removed the NCOD in a number of areas in this part of town already. And you can see the NCOD here really is mostly surface parking. There is a house that's been adapted to an office. And then you have this project really does not comport at all with the NCOD, with the building setback, with parking in front of the building. And here's a house that has been used for business. So again, I think the main question from a policy standpoint is, what is the transition? We feel like by stepping down to 20, from 40 to across the street to 20, where it could be 40 along Glenwood, but we've made the entire site 20, and now you're starting to see 12 stories on zoning to the west between Boylan and St. Mary's. Given the size of the site, the opportunity to provide structured parking in an area of Glenwood South that is desperately in need of more parking, where we have problems with the nightlife and the bar scene, to have more people living on the street, walking on the street, having place to park so cars are not parking in the neighborhoods nearby and circulating throughout the evening hours, are all the kinds of goals that the Glenwood Collaborative and others have been moving toward in recent years. So we feel like this will be a great addition to what we're seeing on Glenwood South. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, I will move to the opposition. Those opposed will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. Questions and comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Paul to pull up the exhibit again that talked about the edge area? That was really my primary concern with this, was about the transition in the edge areas, but I think not, there was one before that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think really the closest low to moderate density residential is across, well, you actually have, the school there on St. Mary's. I should know very well because we lived right by it. So there really isn't even low density residential across St. Mary's, but the Forest Park neighborhood really is where it would exist, several hundred feet away.
Okay, that was my primary concern coming into this, but I think that addresses it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions and comments? Commissioner Otwell.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I have a question for the planning staff. I understand this is, it matches the call for an urban frontage. I was wondering what determines in our urban form maps whether one would request an urban general or a shop front or an urban limited. How does one gain or lose compliance with frontage between the different urban categories?
Sure.
What makes general compliant and not shop front in this case, and how's that decision made?
Any of the urban frontages would be considered compliant, so urban limited or urban general, shop front, or even I think green is also specified as an urban frontage. So there's some choice offered in determining consistency there. And I'm going to get it backwards. Between general and limited, one is closer to shop front than the other, and I can't remember right now which one is which. Matthew, do you know off the top of your head which one is?
No, I don't.
One is a little bit more demanding. I feel like maybe urban general is more demanding than urban limited. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I would be interested in seeing from the applicant some sort of commitment to a shop front style urban frontage, maybe not for the entire property, but at least along Glenwood South to match the frontages being cited. The applicant citing the 40-story zonings adjacent, but they come with shop front frontages as well, and I think it's important for Glenwood South.
Can I follow up on that one? I'd actually just like to know the differential between, using the urban general or using the shopfront, what would be that difference? Is it percentage of transparency? Is it location of entries? Or are those very similar between the two categories?
The main difference is the build-to percentage within the build-to. So I think urban limited is 40 or 50, and then general 60 maybe, and shopfront is 80% within the build-to. If you feel strongly about the shopfront on Glenwood, I think the applicant is willing to take a look at that and see whether we can fashion a condition to meet that standard, which is the higher standard for build-to, which in the build-to comes along with the transparency because you can't have parking between the habitable space and the edge of the building.
In general, in downtown, I think it is appropriate to leave it to the developer's choice as what's appropriate, but along Glenwood South in particular, I do feel strongly about it.
Thank you. Other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Bennett.
Just a general comment. It would be really nice if we had policies or if we had ways to further incentivize applicants to include affordable housing in some of these high-rise apartment buildings. This is a frequent transit area. All of the amenities are noted in the staff report. This is a prime area. We also saw that cost of rent has gone up. I think it's at over 65% in this area. We saw how this area is not very diverse. Affordable housing could address all of that. And it would just be nice to have some way to incentivize that so it was more attractive for applicants to provide that. We've been hearing a lot about safety issues on Glenwood South and in downtown in general. It would be fabulous if the people who we look to protect us could actually afford to live downtown. And we know many of them cannot right now. So I just want to offer that comment. I know it's not a condition, but it would just be nice to see in some of these prime spots in the frequent transit area if there were more incentives. I know we have them with the TOD. It would just be nice to see it outside of the TOD as well.
Thank you. I agree. Other comments from the commissioners? Vice Chair Raines.
Thanks, Chair Miller. Just a clarification question for staff on the downtown transition area policy. It states that it should be tapered adjacent to established residential neighborhoods. As the applicant pointed out, the adjacent area is really not residential, it's more office-based. What is the city staff policy on, what does that mean actually to taper down to other areas that would be residential? I know that doesn't really apply to this particularly in my opinion, but just wanted to hear from you.
So typically, it would mean that we would have to consider proximity to residential neighborhoods when reviewing rezoning requests that have a stark height difference or a proposed stark height difference. The idea being that if you have 1 to 2 story homes in one neighborhood and you kind of have a buffer in between, and then your taller building in the area of in the requested area. So if a taller rezoning request is closer to an existing neighborhood, the idea is you kind of want that scale. So something in between them both. And I don't know if Bynum, you'd like to say a little bit more about that.
I would just say we've seen that taper expressed in many different ways across various zoning cases. Sometimes it's a step back, sometimes it's, which might actually be quite modest. Sometimes it's a more of a wedding cake, actual impact to building height. But it really varies depending on the context.
Thank you. I've been struggling with this one because I know there's development. This is considered a transition area. I guess I would like to ask the applicant if they have discussed this internally or with other neighboring property owners, if there has been discussions about stepping down to the west. So,
I think you got an email that I was filling in for Molly Stewart today, so I haven't been in all the. I think there was one person at the neighborhood meeting who was didn't live in the neighborhood but owned a residence or a building nearby. As I said, I feel like this is stepping down significantly from 40 to 20. I think the question is there a need to further step down? I don't think there's any question about 40 or 20 stories on Glenwood Avenue. Now we do have 12-story zoning, as I said, between Boylan and St. Mary. So what, if any, further on a site that is a large site versus just a standalone development along Boylan? Certainly, again, feel like it's going from 40 to 20. Is there additional needed? We feel like this is appropriate in light of the way other development has occurred in this area. Is there more feedback on?
No, I just wanted to know if there's been discussion internally or with other property owners, and it sounds like there hasn't been, and the intent is to have 20 across the full property.
We have done some massing studies, and the study does show it's more of a building that would be perpendicular to Boylan Avenue. So the broad part of the building would be along Glenwood Avenue. So, it would not encompass the entire block face of Boylan Avenue. And again, we'd like the flexibility. As you know, this is a zoning case, and we don't see site plans often that match the zoning, but you have to anticipate that. So at this point, we definitely want that flexibility.
Totally understand. I encourage density where we can get it in downtown, so I don't have any objection to not transitioning down, so I just wanted to hear from the applicant on the discussions.
Thank you. And I'll just add on that same point, we've seen several rezoning cases in this North Boylan near this NCOD, and we typically point it out as one of those cases where the original purpose and design of the NCOD is sort of no longer, the historical intention of it is no longer relevant because most of, if not essentially all of the buildings have transitioned to commercial in that area. And certainly with the transit and other density and along Glenwood South have sort of looked at some of these same issues before. And typically that's the same reason we come down on, have historically come down on providing height in that area, because even though it sort of looks like homes, it's actually all commercial buildings around it. Commissioner Hafer.
Yeah, I share some of Commissioner Rain's concerns. Just looking at the zoning, I understand that there's DX 40 across the street, but everything on the west of Glenwood is 12.735, except for that case that we heard a few months ago further up Boylan, where we did ask the applicant to look at some tapering, which I think we had some robust discussion around that, and we're concerned about it. So I don't really have any issues with the NCOD. I too support density and development in this area, but I would like the applicant to, again, without backing themselves into a corner, at least consider if there's an opportunity to add some conditions to minimize the height sort of along the, we are backing up, getting pretty close to Cameron Park and some other areas there. So again, fully in support of this case, and just looking at the conditions there and trying to be consistent on other cases we've heard in similar areas with just having some discussion around it. So I anticipate and expect that we would probably have some more conversation around this in the next meeting or prior to the meeting with the applicant.
Thank you. Other comments and questions? Does the applicant have any other response to, would like to address those comments, or?
Well, as I said in response to Commissioner Otwell, we're happy to look at the shop front, and it sounds like we'll be having some more conversations with commissioners before we come back about transition and other related issues.
Thank you. And then if we were to defer this to our October 24th meeting, I believe that means conditions would need to be in by this Friday. Would that provide sufficient time?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Then without objection, I will hold this case until our October 24th meeting. Are there any other comments on this case before we move on? Seeing none. Thank you very much. We will move on to the next new business item, item F3, rezoning case Z2723 at the Dawson Assemblage. This case is to rezone approximately 2.02 acres from downtown mixed-use 12 stories, urban general frontage with conditions, to downtown mixed-use 40 stories, urban general frontage with conditions. We will now turn to Matthew Burns for a presentation from city planning staff.
Hello again. This is rezoning request Z27, which would apply to 3 parcels, 215 North Dawson, which is 300 West Jones Street and 308 West Jones Street. The area of request is currently zoned DX12 with urban general frontage, and the requested zoning is downtown mixed use, 40 stories, urban general with conditional use. And this area of request is the location of the Metropolitan Apartments fire, which occurred in March of 2017. The deadline for this request is November 25th, 2023. Zoning in the area is primarily mixed use. Parcels to the north, east, south, and west of the site are DX12 with urban general frontage. One parcel to the north is zoned industrial mixed use, which is actually Wake County Fleet Administration, which you can see on the map. And another one to the northeast is DX 40 stories with urban general frontage and conditional use, which is similar to the request. And I guess the closest comparable zoning district would be the Longleaf Hotel and Lounge site, which is also DX 40, urban general frontage, conditional use. The site area is surrounded by downtown commercial uses, and other uses near the site are, as I mentioned, the Wake County Fleet Administration, and then west past Glenwood Avenue is the Gramercy development, and then institutional office in North Boylan. And to the east and southeast of the site are the NC General Assembly, Museum of History, Museum of Natural Sciences, and the Capitol Building. And similar to Z26, the Smoky Hollow development and Publix are located about a 10-minute walk north of the site, and there is a proposed BRT station for the intersection of Peace Street and Capitol. The site is just south and west of the Dawson Street and McDowell Street split, the major corridor where US 70 feeds into downtown Raleigh. So I mentioned the Longleaf Hotel already, which is northeast on Lane Street, but immediately west of the site are the Metropolitan and Link apartments, and there are a number of government buildings east of the site, including the Center for Health Statistics, Division of Soil and Water Conservation, Department of Public Safety, Community Colleges System, and North Carolina Vital Records. Here are a couple views of the site, and you can see the existing parking lot and site in the Metropolitan Apartments in the top left. The applicant is providing one zoning condition which prohibits some uses that are normally allowed in DX. The requested zoning would increase entitlement on site by increasing the maximum number of residential units and the maximum gross office square footage. The maximum gross retail square footage and build-to requirements would not change. Compared to citywide averages, the area of request is highly walkable to office buildings, restaurants, and public realm amenities downtown, served by an above-average number of public transit routes, located close to existing bike infrastructure, has a very low cost of transportation, and is very close to existing employment centers. The area of request is served by Go Raleigh Route 2 and is close to multiple transit stops downtown, all within walking distance. It's very close to routes 4, 6, 8, and 16. The request would allow for a taller maximum building height and a more intense mix of office, residential, and commercial uses. It would add to the housing supply, permit a variety of housing types, and allow smaller units. The proposed conditions do not include subsidized units. Residents on site are slightly less likely to be people of color and less likely to be low income than the city average. Housing costs have increased over 46% within the site's census tract since 2016, which is higher than the city average of 25%. The area of request is consistent with the future land use map designation of Central Business District. The request is consistent with the urban form map as it includes urban general frontage. Urban frontages are recommended in downtown areas. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, including the future land use map guidance for Central Business District and the urban form map. Staff identified 14 comprehensive policies consistent with the request. The first 7 shown here are related to zoning consistency, higher intensity development, development near existing and planned transit, and urban pattern and frontage. And the next 7 concern higher density development and vertical mixed use, public realm amenities, and urban design. Staff did not identify any policies inconsistent with the request. There are no outstanding issues with the request, and the Planning Commission's deadline for action is November 25th, 2023.
Thank you very much. Moving on to public comment. The applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the Commission. I'm Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street here on behalf of the applicant, the North Carolina League of Municipalities. I'm joined today by Rose Williams as well as Jennifer Shiner with the League, and we also have Joe Michael with us in case there are questions about as to form. The vision for this project is really to take what is now an existing parking lot that was the former site of the League but destroyed by the fire that Matthew mentioned in 2017 and transform it back into a true home for the League. So to start things off, I'd like to invite Rose Williams to give a little brief introduction about who the League is and their vision for this property following the fire.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Rose Vaughn Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina League of Municipalities. In addition to our contract counsel, and we have our General Counsel, Jen Schneer, and Robert Clark, who's a member of our Board of Directors, a member of our Building Committee that we've had since this fire destroyed our property in 2017. And I'm not sure exactly how to, want to tell you a little bit about the League. We are a membership organization that's been in existence since 1908. We have about 560 members and individual members, total in the thousands across the state. We're run by a 33-member board of directors we're member-driven. We have owned this property since at least the late 60s, early 70s, and the main building was built around 1979. And as you can see, they've all been demolished after the fire. They're deemed unsafe, and they're also looking pretty bad. So we went ahead and took them down and didn't want to be a mark on the city. We have also, we run 3 insurance companies, public entity insurance companies, since the 1980s. And so we run these out of this property as well. A property casualty company, a workers' compensation, also public entity company, and a health insurance company as well. We had 3 buildings on the site. We had our one building that held the executive director's office, the communications, membership services, legal help, and then we had our insurance building that ran the 3 pools and all the staff that ran them. There was a 3rd building on the property that we rented for income to an insurance agency, a private insurance agent. So that brings us to what we do.
In addition to providing these products and services, such as insurance to these public entities, we provide professional consulting, insurance and risk management. I mentioned legislative and judicial advocacy has always been a core of what we do, which is why you see the legislative building is near to us, and that's always been extremely special and important to what we do. Events and training, marketplace for preferred vendors for our members, and also we provide American Rescue Plan services in these last 2 years. The last thing I'll show is just a picture of an in-person event that we like to have and showing some of our members in action. And with that, I will step down unless there's anything else. Back to Jane. Thank you.
Thank you.
So these pictures show the site as it is today. The alley there that you see on the edge is right next to the edge of our property, next to the Met, and kind of showing how we are approximate to some of our nearby neighbors. The Met, of course, was the site that actually burned while it was being constructed. So shortly after this site was rezoned in the general remapping in 2016, the very next year, the Met caught fire and damaged the buildings, as Rose mentioned. So the site is currently in this aerial that you see here, right on the core to downtown as you come in from the north. And as Rose mentioned, really proximate to other government services, including the legislature, where much of their time is spent serving elected leaders and officials. So with that vision in mind of how to come forward after the property's been destroyed, the League has been operating and trying to provide these services elsewhere downtown, but as a nonprofit, rents have affected them as well, just as they've affected other people. And so their idea was to combine the 3 parcels together and pursue a zoning up to DX 40 urban general with conditions to allow them to rebuild on the site, not only their headquarters, but some additional space above that a partner would need to complete. They're not developers, they're essentially municipal servants. And so the zoning conditions are those that are comparable to others you've seen in 40-story downtown zoning cases, but this is one of the, I think, unique 40-story cases that really hits all of those comprehensive plan policies. This graphic was from the Downtown Raleigh Association, and shows kind of the proposed development and approved area approved buildings in the area. And what this graphic shows is just how much height and density is coming to the overall area. And the area that the site is in is designated on the comprehensive plan and the urban form map, the table to go up to 40 stories. It doesn't have those same type of issues with proximate, existing single family neighborhoods nearby. It really is poised for that type of height. And so it's a rather unique case in that it's consistent with not only the future land use map, the urban form map, but all of the policies from the transit to providing a home for government services and allowing folks to kind of build on site to what's an appropriate height, which is that 40-story designation here. The urban general frontage, we talked about that in your other case. The reason that was selected here is that all the properties surrounding this is also urban general, and that's a designation that was placed on the site by the city during the remapping. So we thought that was most consistent here. And then this slide just shows a little bit more of the consistency with the comprehensive plan, really hitting all of those, checking all of those boxes in terms of land use, urban design, form, and putting folks and businesses and jobs in proximity to transit. We appreciate the staff's thorough review and the staff report and finding that consistency and also identifying that there's no outstanding issues. We didn't have anyone come to our second neighborhood meeting. It was more of a general interest at the first, and I think it's the type of development that's expected in this area given the comprehensive plan guidance. And so we're here today excited to help this nonprofit to move forward, to find this new home, take their vacant lot into a really more robust development that allows them to stay here and kind of reclaim their place downtown, but still in proximity to the legislature to allow them to serve elected officials as they have for nearly a century. So we appreciate your time and we're available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, we'll move it to the opposition. Those opposed will have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. Are there any questions or comments from the commissioners?
Commissioner Fox.
I find no inconsistencies with this, and I'm ready to support it.
Thank you. Can I entertain a motion?
Hold on one second, if we could.
Yes.
It seems like, again, I'm fully in support of the project. If we think back about some recent rezonings that we've discussed, we have asked, or at least had conversation with the applicant about, again, some type of public art, some type of commitment to a little bit more meaningful open space to strengthen the urban fabric. We've talked about building materials. We've had lots of conversations along this corridor, understanding that Dawson is probably one of the heaviest trafficked streets. I'm not suggesting that we have people hanging out on Dawson, but I think right up the street at 301 Hillsborough is a good example of how some of that urban fabric and how we can create that streetscape. So I'm fully in support. I just am curious from my other commissioner members, I feel like we've had lots of discussion around some of those items, so I'm not sure if there are any other concerns on the commission.
Thank you. Vice Chair Reins.
Thanks, Chair Miller. I would like to see something about material use, or maybe omitting certain materials like fiberboard and not appropriate materials for downtown dense development. I don't have a list of that, but I would just request some condition for limitations of material for this downtown development. I guess I would ask the applicant if they could comment on that.
Thank you. If the applicant would like to comment on building materials condition and then also on the other aspects of conditions that might, or other conditions or other items that might address the urban fabric and streetscape in this area.
Thank you. We hadn't considered a list of conditions. I think we're happy to do that. I think the difficulty here is that they will not be the developer. They'll need a developer partner to be able to complete the project. So we're trying to, it's not something where we can say, is this part of the planned form? So if you have specific materials you'd like us to consider, I think we'd be open to that, but we don't have something that's ready to pull off the shelf. Also happy to think about that and add that as we go forward to council.
May I ask
Yes, Commissioner Fox.
I guess a question for staff. Is this particular area or any of the frontages designated as retail streets in downtown plan?
Yeah, let me pull up my presentation to show you. There's shop front to the south, I believe. But it's a few streets away. Yeah, so south of Edenton Street, there's DX20 with shop front, and then a few blocks west, there's DX12 with shop front. But immediately surrounding the site is mostly urban general.
I think I'm referring more to a designation that was in the comp plan related to retail streets.
That's right, you are. The retail streets map marks Hillsborough and Glenwood are the closest. So Hillsborough from Dawson west.
Okay. That was my read as well, and that's why I didn't make comments related to the streetscape, because generally we've been focusing our efforts on those streets that are designated as retail streets.
I appreciate that comment. I think that just in general as a community, I think I would like to have more discussion about strengthening the urban fabric. Dawson Street is a harsh street. There are a lot of pedestrians that cross that street. There are a lot of folks that use that area of downtown. We're looking to increase development in that area of downtown. I just would like to have some discussion with the applicant, again, not backing them in a corner, understanding they need a development partner, that at least we're having some conversation around it versus just having one condition on there and rushing to motion for approval. So I'm not suggesting that I'm going to deny or recommend denial if we don't get there. I just would like to have some additional discussion around it.
Maybe it might help to walk through what's required with an urban general frontage related to things like transparency and how the building meets the street and what streetscape requirements would be in effect with a site plan.
Just a moment. So for urban general frontage, development would be located within 20 feet of the street and needs to fill significant street frontage. No on-site parking or vehicular surface area is permitted between the building and the street. And parking is required to have a minimum 30-foot setback from the primary street.
Thank you. Commissioner Fox?
I guess it
Follow-up?
might be helpful to know what the streetscape planning requirements would be in that part of town, just as a requirement of code.
It's a main street frontage requirement. Streetscape width is 35 feet with a 10-foot sidewalk and a 6-foot planting area.
Thank you.
Requires sidewalk, tree grate, and tree spacing 40 feet on average.
Thank you. It's a pretty robust streetscape.
Commissioner Haver?
Yeah, agreed. We've talked about it before. One of my biggest concerns with some of the streetscape requirements, including the 10% open space, is it does not result in meaningful urban fabric in a lot of conditions. It can, but in a lot of situations downtown, it does not. And so, again, just would like to have some open dialogue with the applicant, and let's just see if it's something that we can, without hampering them moving forward in this development, which again, I'm 100% in agreement with. I just personally, and my concerns, and I think for us to be consistent as a commission, we have lots of other projects that come through that at least there's some conversation around it versus rushing to motion for approval. So I don't think it's a very steep hill to consider. I just would like to have some additional conversation around it.
Thank you very much. Are there additional conditions that you would like to see, or just want to have a general conversation? I'm figuring out next steps. Is this perhaps a recommendation we could include to council as they are reviewing this case, or is this something you want to hold at the table to see if there are additional conditions that might be changed or added?
I don't want to hold them up. I believe that they had agreed to at least look at the material, so I feel like they've sort of agreed to come back to the next meeting, so I'd like to take advantage of that without slowing down the process too.
Understood. My mistake. I thought the applicant had said they would look at that on the way to council. So would the applicant like to respond in terms of timing and willingness to offer additional conditions to the Planning Commission, perhaps before our October 24th meeting so submitting conditions by this Friday?
I think we'd be happy to evaluate that. I think we'd like some specific direction as to what that is, because given the tight time frame and that we don't have a specific palette. So if there's certain things you'd like us to consider, I would like to know what those are.
Yes, to address the applicant's comment, I think that the materials that should not be permitted are EFS, like stucco, vinyl, and rough sawn wood. I mean, that's just kind of basics. I mean, with the project that's probably going to go here, I doubt any developer would apply that for this area, but I would feel more comfortable if those were included as a condition.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, just making sure we understood what all of those were. And I think similar for the streetscape, if there's particular elements that you'd like us to consider now or before Friday, it'd be.
Yeah, I mean, I think public art is one that some applicants have used. I think you have an exceptional urban designer there, Mr. Michaels. So I think, again, some type of meaningful public space. It doesn't have to be massive. It's just that 10% open space leads to sidewalks without very meaningful space. You can take a little strip and count that towards your 10% that nobody uses. And so I've seen that part of the ordinance not result in meaningful space. And I think with the team you have assembled, we've talked about, we did talk about materials, open space, public art. I'm trying to think of some of the other tools that we've used to at least move the needle on the urban fabric. So is that
that's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with that, it'd probably be easiest if we came back on the 24th and tried to finalize any conditions this week to hope to move out on the 24th.
On the 24th, yes, excuse me.
Well, I just said that. I hope that's it. I hope that's
that was
the
right. I
date.
think I may have misspoken and said the 25th before. Okay, great. Any other comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, without objection, I will defer this case to our October 24th meeting to provide the applicant time to provide revised conditions. Thank you very much. Moving on to our next item, item F4, rezoning case Z2923 at 8113 Ligon Mill Road. This case is to change approximately 105.16 acres from Wake County R30 to R10 conditional use and RX3 conditional use. We will now turn to Bronwyn Radis for a presentation from city planning staff.
Thanks. Bronwyn Radis, Planning and Development. So this site is located at 8113 Ligon Mill Road. Again, it's just over 100 acres, requested to be rezoned from Wake County R30 to R10 conditional use and RX3 conditional use. So zoning in the area is predominantly residential. As you'll notice, the site is currently Wake County R30, meaning that it's not in Raleigh's planning jurisdiction today. It's in the urban service area, surrounded on the north, south, and east on more urban service area. And then it is adjacent to corporate limits, so just to the west there, that's a Thornton Road property, which is a city-owned property intended to be a future park. So that is in the city's corporate limits today. Here's a look at an aerial of the area surrounding the site. Some existing neighborhoods, low-density residential. I'll point out that the Neuse River is just west of the site, and there's some more environmental features just north of the site. Again, the Thornton Road property is adjacent, and then you have some industrial uses to the west. Here's a look at the site from Ligon Mill Road. Today, the site is mostly wooded. There's two existing residential structures kind of tucked back away on the site in the woods today. So there are going to be 7 proposed conditions here. The applicant has proposed or provided revised conditions since the last time this item was published on the agenda. So you all didn't discuss it yet, but there has been newly proposed conditions since then. So that is kind of the one chance we have to have revised conditions for this case at Planning Commission. But I'll just walk through the conditions here. So number 1 is that density should not exceed a maximum of 5 units per acre or 475 units total. At least 20 acres of the site will remain as natural area or open space. If an apartment building type is developed on the property, it must be used for congregate care, continuing care, retirement center, rest home, similar type uses. All buildings shall be set back at least 20 feet from Ligon Mill Road. And then the applicant has proposed a $65,000 contribution to the City of Raleigh Fire Department. And then also offered a contribution of a total of $40,000 per dwelling unit for 1% of all site plan approved dwelling units towards the city's affordable housing fund. Then the final condition here is that the applicant will provide 60 days prior notice to surrounding homeowners within a 500-foot radius of any blasting that will be done on the property during construction. So the entitlement is going to be limited by that condition number 1, the 475 units. I'll note that this yield is somewhere in between what we would expect between an R4 or an R6 residential zoning district. And the requested RX3 CU would allow for some office or retail square footage to be incorporated as well. So the request scores lower on our transportation and energy indicators. This is far north, not in our ETJ today, so suggesting that development on this site would likely not advance the comprehensive plan's goals for connected low carbon emission development. And so the site is about 2 miles away from the nearest transit stop. It is the Route 25L, the Triangle Town Link, and not accessible on foot or bicycle safely today. The request does add to the housing supply, permitting smaller units, different variety of units, but it doesn't include any subsidized units, although it does include that contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund. And then, of course, it's not within walking distance of transit. So residents in this area are more diverse and more wealthy than the citywide average, but housing costs in the area appear to be increasing rapidly. It looks like 22% from 2020 to 2021, just a 1-year period there. So that's more rapid than the citywide average for that time period. The requested zoning districts are consistent with the low-scale residential, and that's because of those zoning conditions that limit the entitlement and the apartment type. So though it's consistent with the future land use map, it is coming up as inconsistent with the comprehensive plan overall. Consistent policies include, again, the future land use map. All the conditions provided are consistent with the future land use map as well. And then zoning for housing is flagged as a consistent policy here. But the inconsistencies, the location of growth, again, this being in the urban service area, and a larger site, the 100 acres, over 100 acres outside of the ETJ. It is flagged for fire service concerns, so it's not meeting the NFPA standards for the second deployment at a fire incident or the full deployment at a fire incident. So it's not meeting those standard response times. And on the screen, the meets and bounds and a survey have been provided showing the area of the split zoning. So we have that now. So that's no longer an outstanding issue. But your deadline for action is November 25th. And your upcoming meetings would be October 24th and November 14th. Can I answer any questions before you invite the applicant up?
Thank you. I would ask the commissioners to hold questions until the conclusion of public comment. Moving on to public comment, the applicant and those in favor will have a total of 10 minutes to speak.
Good morning again, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602. I'm joined here today with my client, Julie Gavigan of Blue Hill Development, the prospective developer of this property. We also have Mike Roselli, our civil engineer, and Mike Sarowski, our traffic engineer, here available to answer questions. We were originally scheduled for the last Planning Commission meeting. We got bumped from that. And we took that opportunity, and we got some input from some planning commissioners and also from council members, and we made some changes to conditions. I did not think that was our one bite at the apple, though, because we never were heard by planning commission, and we didn't get planning commission feedback and the ability to do that. I mean, I'd like to move out of planning commission today, but I want to know that we still have the opportunity to react and potentially pivot if needed.
Mr. York, do you have a response to that one? If we may repeat, this case originally appeared on our last agenda, but it was deferred to this meeting. In the meantime, they revised conditions, and wondering if those revised conditions constitute their one bite at the apple, considering the fact that they were never actually previously heard, or if they still have an opportunity to provide additional changes.
I'll need to double check the words as they're written in the UDO as to this specific issue, but the intent was that applicants would have an opportunity to make at least one change to their application during the review by Planning Commission. And arguably, you all haven't had a chance officially to give them feedback. So, but let me double check while y'all listen to Ms. Maddox.
TBD.
Okay, I'll continue, but I will note that I've just lost about 1 minute of my time.
We will add it back to you. Thank you.
I need all my time today.
Yes.
Also, I want to point out that I think this case is similar to the case you heard earlier this morning, Z13. However, we think this case offers some stronger conditions than that one did. So just continuing through our case, this is a zoning map, you've seen that, and you see the area, I think importantly on this, how dense the development is to the north of this site. So this is not a rural area. Same thing on the aerial, you can see that also to really all sides, there's a lot of density. The request is we're going to request rezoning and annexation. We are not in the ETJ, as was pointed out. We're going to R10 and RX3. Our proposal is for an active adult community, age-targeted, single-family, detached, and townhouses on the bulk of the site, and then phase 2 would be a proposed CCRC. And that is the reason for the little bit of RX zoning, so that we could do an apartment building type there and take advantage of the RX zoning there. We do propose an overall density of 5 units per acre maximum. So it's keeping with the future land use map of low-scale residential. We are consistent with that map. And I think importantly, even though we're not in the city's ETJ, we are on the city's future land use map, as shown here on this slide. And just continuing our conceptual site layout, you'll see this area up here is for the single and towns right here. We'll have a large amount of open space here, and then down here we propose the CCRC. This particular developer has done an active adult community in other parts of the triangle, one in Cary, one in Hillsborough, and this is the sort of an example of the types of homes they build. There are high quality properties. So staff had a lot of issues, as you heard. We would like to push back on those because I think we have a lot more strengths on this case than was pointed out. One of the points was it's not in the ETJ and that it was not adequately served by infrastructure. In fact, this is a very urbanized area between Raleigh and Wake Forest. We believe that small lots with public utilities is preferable to large lots with a well and septic, which is what you would do under county zoning. So we think it's to everybody's benefit to develop this with public utilities. And the public utilities, unfortunately, I don't have the slide that shows how close they are, but water right now exists on both the north and the south on Ligon Mill Road. We do have to do a small extension of the line, but we could go north and connect to city water, and we could go north and connect the city sewer. The sewer abuts this property. We would just be to the immediate north. The fire coverage, there are many stations in close proximity. I have a slide on that in just a second. We've also agreed to commit $65,000 to the fire department for a station or equipment, which we think is a significant equipment. We tagged this to units, and our dollars per unit was something like $136, whereas the case you heard this morning, I did the math, and it was about $47 or $42, something like that. Lack of goods and services, we have a slide. We are reasonably close on that, and this is age targeted, so we don't really think people are going to be walking to the grocery store. I really don't think many people walk to the grocery store anyway, but I don't think seniors are going to be doing that. And a lack of employment opportunities. I think there probably are a decent amount nearby, but this, again, is age targeted, so these are retired folks for the most part. To just go specifically, this is the corporate limits of Raleigh. The gray area is Raleigh city limits, and you can see how much area there is nearby, way up to the north of us, to the west of us, to the east of us. There's significant Raleigh. The green is Wake Forest, the purple or pink is Rolesville. We're close to Wake Forest, admittedly, but we are also very close and surrounded by Raleigh on at least 3 sides. Those are some fairly recent zoning cases the city has approved that are in close proximity. Our property's here. Here are these cases. Z82 was approved this year by the city. Z34 was approved in 20 or 21, and these others are fairly recent cases. So these are very close to this site. We are not out in the hinterlands. This is an urban area. As to fire, there are 5 fire stations within fairly close proximity. This shows the distance, and it gives you the miles for each one. The city's standards are 2 stations within 6 minutes. Existing, we have 1 station within 3 minutes and 1 within 7 minutes. Another requirement is full assignment within 8 minutes. We have 3 stations within 8 minutes. Now, every station doesn't have all the equipment, so I can't tell you what the exact algorithm the City of Raleigh Fire Department uses, but we've got a lot. We're very close to meeting these requirements. And to mitigate the fire issue, we've offered the $65,000, and we also have used in other cases I have been involved in, we've had a deferred annexation date. So, this is going to be several years before these properties are actually being occupied. So I think a deferred annexation would give the city time to beef up some of the fire stations, and they already know they're and are working towards that, and we think our contribution will go a long way towards addressing that issue. As far as goods and services, there are 2 shopping centers in fairly close proximity. Forestville Shopping Center is 1.4 miles away from this site. There's a grocery store, a pharmacy, urgent care, dentist practice, a bank, 8 restaurants. Then Perry Creek and Lewisburg, 2.5 miles away. Again, a grocery store, drugstore, convenience, restaurants, ATM. Plenty of goods and services with a short distance away. Our proposed conditions are 5 units or 475 dwelling units max, at least 20 acres of natural open space, and 15 of those to be contiguous. We're very close to a compact development model here, and we probably will end up using that. If an apartment building type is used, it will have to be either a congregate care, CCRC, rest home, independent or assisting facility. No market rate apartments here. We did commit to the neighbors, we would maintain a 20-foot setback from Ligon Mill Road. They didn't want a large building real close to the street. We've talked about the fire department commitment. We've also importantly agreed to commit to affordable housing, the same condition you've seen in other cases, $40,000 per dwelling unit for 1% of approved dwelling units. And that translated for maximum build out here to $190,000 commitment for affordable housing. This is not an affordable site itself because it doesn't have transit nearby, but we do want to help with the affordable issue in Raleigh, and we think that's a significant contribution. And the blasting condition, again, is a response to neighbors. They were concerned about blasting and what effect it would have on their homes. We said, we'll come in and we'll take a look at your house before. We'll give you the opportunity to let us know, do you want us to do a pre-blasting inspection? And we'll do that, so we'll have it documented. And then we'll come back and do a post-blasting, and we will reimburse you for damages that are clearly shown to be caused by the blasting. So let's see. To summarize, it's a fairly low-density case, 5 units to the acre max. It's a little bit lower than that. Age targeted, I think that's important. And this, even though this is not going to be affordable housing, these will be more affordable senior housing than they're available in many areas of town. We see developments going up where I'm hearing just rents and, the cost is just horrific. This will be a little bit less than that because the property is a little bit less expensive. Affordable housing, fire contribution, consistent with the future land use. We think we're addressing a need for senior housing. We're protective of the environment, and we're, with the open space commitment. And we appreciate your support of this case, and certainly available to answer any questions. My experts are here as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just so I can get a sense by show of hands, are there any other members here of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Then seeing none, we'll move to the opposition. Those opposed have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table. Are there questions and comments from commissioners? And actually, I'll kick us off. Mr. York, have you haven't had an opportunity to look into that issue yet? If not,
Yes.
you have. Okay.
Yes. UDO Section 1024E2B talks about during review and deliberation of the Planning Commission. If you haven't heard the case, you can't deliberate. And so I think their one bite at the apple, as we refer to it, during Planning Commission is still available to them should you want to pursue that.
Okay, thank you very much. And then turning it back to the table, questions and comments from our commissioners. Yes, Commissioner Bennett.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I just want to start and say, Isabel, you're really good because I had a lot of issues with this one. And it was like you anticipated every question or comment I was going to make and addressed it. So bravo to you. I appreciate the conditions about, the contribution to fire. I appreciate you explaining how you came up with that. And I appreciate the contribution to the Affordable Housing Fund. And I like that it's age targeted. I like a lot about it. I had some of the same concerns that I had expressed about the earlier one. But as you were walking through it, as staff was walking through it, I think those have all been addressed. And I think this is serving a need. And my mom recently moved to an age-targeted community, and my sister and I were trying to decide whether she was going to move to where my sister is in Virginia or here in Raleigh. And we really couldn't afford to move her here to Raleigh. And so she's in Virginia with my sister, which is fine. But I just, as you're talking about that, the opportunity to expand these types of communities to seniors who maybe can't afford some of the ones that are available, that's definitely serving a need. So when I look at rezonings like this one and like the previous one that are kind of out, I try to weigh that against the benefit being offered, and I feel like this one is offering a lot of benefits, and I appreciate the conditions that are being offered. So you won me over.
Thank you. Vice Chair Raines.
Thanks, Chair Miller. I agree with everything that Commissioner Bennett has said. I do know this community needs more adult and CCRC facilities. I also have personal experience with that in my family. So fully support this. I did have concerns about it being remote from services. Still think that is a little bit of an issue, but 1.4 miles away is not, it's not bad, I guess. So I support that. I would ask, though, since there's something that's adjacent to the site that I think could be a positive amenity, as the owner or applicant talked about connecting to the greenway across the river. I think that would be
I think we will be required to do a greenway easement here along
okay.
the riverfront frontage. So we haven't put that as a specific condition, but that's generally a requirement, as we've been anticipating that as a requirement of the development.
Okay. Is that, I guess that staff, is that something that will be required, some connection?
Easement as a part of the subdivision. Easement as a part of the subdivision, since it's a residential subdivision, is usually required, yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments? Then seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion. Commissioner Bennett.
I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated September 26, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment. This recommendation also includes an amendment to the 2030 comprehensive plan to the extent described in the adopted consistency statement. The action taken is reasonable and in the public interest because the request would increase the amount and variety of housing that could be built on the site, which would increase the City of Raleigh's overall housing supply. The change in conditions taken into account in amending the zoning ordinance to meet the development needs of the community are the benefit of additional housing supply on relative housing costs.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Fox has seconded by show of hands. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Thank you. Move. It being 11:33? Yes. It being 11:33. We have two cases remaining on the agenda. We have actually, for our new business, we've actually been making kind of record time, but do you think there's a chance we won't get to the second one? Is that what you're saying?
I was thinking that if Mr. Burns kept his comments brief and quick,
Oh, yes.
we might get to the item after his.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Yes. If we could be efficient in our comments, that would be excellent. Thank you so much. So first is rezoning case Z3123 at 4317 Whitfield Road. This case is to change approximately 0.75 acres from Wake County R30 to R4.
Good morning. Yeah, this case Z31 is located in Wake County's jurisdiction, and the applicant has indicated property owners interested in connecting to Raleigh Utility Services, which requires annexation, and they have submitted a request for annexation. The deadline for this request is December 9th, 2023. Zoning in the area is predominantly residential, with Wake County Residential 30 to the south and east, and Raleigh Residential within to the north and west. The closest mixed-use zoning, for context, is 1 mile west at intersection of Battle Bridge and Rock Quarry. Site area is predominantly located near low and moderate scale residential uses. The closest commercial is shops at Battle Bridge, which has a Food Lion, CVS, and some restaurants. And there is private open space at the River Ridge Golf Club, which is east along Battle Bridge. This is an expanded overhead view of the site, which shows the approximate boundaries of the proposed Battle Crossings development at the intersection of Whitfield and Battle Bridge. Here are a few views of
Mr. Burns, could you speak into the mic, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Here are some views of the site, including the single-family home, which is currently existing, and views north and south on Whitfield Road. The request is for a general use district, therefore there are no zoning conditions proposed. The requested zoning district would slightly increase entitlement on site. It would also decrease the minimum lot size for single-family attached and detached homes from 30,000 square feet in Wake County R30 to 10,000 square feet in City of Raleigh R4. And the request would also allow townhomes to be built on site. The request is located within Phase 1 of Raleigh's proposed ETJ expansion into the Southeast Special Study Area. And you can see it on the map with a star. And compared to citywide averages, the area of request is less pedestrian-friendly, less bikeable, and has less access to transit. This is partly due to its location in the county. Whitfield and Battle Bridge are built to NCDOT standards and do not have curb, gutter, sidewalks, or bike lanes. There are 2 transit stops 1 mile west at the shops at Battle Bridge, but they're not particularly walkable due to the lack of sidewalks. The closest bus routes are 17 and 18, but again, they're not walkable. The request would potentially increase the housing supply if redeveloped in the future. Existing zoning allows for 1 unit of single-family detached or 2 units of single-family attached. Requested zoning would allow up to 3 units of single-family detached, 6 units of attached, or 4 units as townhomes. Residents on site are more likely to be racial minorities and slightly less likely to be low income than city average. Rental costs have increased since 2016, but more slowly than the city average. The request is consistent with the future land use map. R4 is slightly below the recommended intensity for moderate scale residential. And the applicant's requesting a residential district rezoning, therefore zoning frontages cannot be applied. The request is consistent overall with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. Staff identified 2 comp plan policies consistent with the request, which generally concern future land use map and zoning consistency and the zoning of annexed lands. Furthermore, area-specific guidance in the Southeast Special Study, there is Action SE 12, ETJ expansion, which recommends extending the extraterritorial jurisdiction in Area 1 of the Southeast Special Study area. As far as inconsistencies, the site does not meet the National Fire Protection Standards for the arrival of a second company or the deployment of an initial full alarm assignment at a fire suppression incident. The site is not currently within a Raleigh Fire Response District. It's currently within the Town of Garner's Fire Response Zone. The nearest Raleigh Fire Station is number 26 along Barwell Road, and the request would expand the city's jurisdiction and therefore expand the area of service concern. Your deadline for action is December 9th, 2023, and there are no outstanding issues.
Thank you very much. Then moving on to public comment, and for efficiency's sake, just so we can get a sense by show of hands, is there anyone here in opposition to this project? Thank you. This is I know it's a common theme that we've heard on other cases related to fire and proximity of services. I will bring up the applicant and those in favor who have a total of 10 minutes to speak. But given the limited nature of this small parcel going to R4, hopefully we can be pretty efficient on this one. Thank you.
Hi, Chair Miller, members of the Planning Commission, Ashley Honeycutt-Terrazas with Parker Poe. I will be brief, just a couple of slides really to zoom out and talk to the Commission a little bit about what's going on here. You know, this is, so just to give some background and the nature of this request is primarily about annexation. So this, as you can see, that green line right there, that is sewer that is now installed. It was installed by the developer of the Cavestead residential project down at the corner of, yeah, you can see it there, down at the intersection of Rock Quarry and Whitfield. So Ms. Emmons really just wants to be able to connect to Raleigh Public Utilities. Her neighbor was in the ETJ, has now been annexed by the city of Raleigh. Her property happened to not be in the ETJ, so we do need to apply Raleigh zoning. We're asking for the same zoning as all of the other residential low-density residences in the area, just, to be consistent. Again, this is not a redevelopment. She just wants to be able to connect to the water and sewer that's now been installed on her property.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support of this project? Seeing none, and I will officially open it up to public comment for opposition as well. And seeing none, I'll bring it back to the table. Are there any comments or questions from commissioners? Seeing none, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Sure. I'll move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated October 10th, 2023, contained in the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second?
Second.
Vice Chair Raines is seconded. All those in favor by show of hands. Any opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Thank you very much. Moving on to our last case, item F6, rezoning Z3723 at Needham Road. This case is to change approximately 1.27 acres from R4 with Special Highway Overlay District 1 to R10 conditional use with Special Highway Overlay District 1. We'll turn to Bronwyn Reedus for a presentation from City Planning staff.
Thank you. Bronwyn Reedus, Planning and Development. The requested area to be rezoned is along Needham Road and is just over 1 acre in size. So zoning in the area directly surrounding the site is residential, as you can see, R10 CU. And then there is some nearby mixed use to the east, OX3 and CX3. I'll note that this surrounding area, pretty much all of this area just to the east of 540. A lot of it has been rezoned recently and approved for various developments recently. So we have some approved townhome developments, apartments, as well as commercial at the intersection of Forestville and Buffalo Road. Now, a lot of that is approved, but not constructed yet. So this is what it looks like today. Wooded, lots of open space, some low-density residential surrounding. Here's a look at the site today from Needham Road. There is one existing house on the site, constructed in the 1980s. The applicant has proposed 3 zoning conditions. The first, prohibiting some uses, so boarding house, outdoor sports and entertainment facility, bed and breakfast, and hospitality houses would be prohibited. Apartments are prohibited. And then no individual townhouse building shall contain more than 7 dwelling units. The entitlement or projected estimated entitlement is increasing from 11 to about 27 with the requested rezoning. So based on the surrounding context today, the request scores lower on our transportation and energy indicators. As you saw in the aerial image, a lot of open space and undeveloped forested area today. The nearest transit stop, again, it's this Route 25L, the Triangle Service Link. It is about 3 miles away from the site today, so not accessible. The request adds to the housing supply, allowing for smaller lots, smaller units, permitting a variety of different housing types, but it doesn't include any subsidized units. Residents in this area are more diverse and lower income than the citywide average, and housing costs in the area are increasing at a rate comparable to the citywide average, suggesting the area could benefit from an increased housing supply. The requested R10 CU is consistent with the future land use designation of community mixed use, especially taken into consideration with the rest of this node located at the intersection of Forestville and Buffalo Road. It is adjacent to that future commercial development and supporting that future development. So the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the future land use map. Consistent policies here include the future land use map, density transitions, zoning for housing, development at freeway interchanges, which encourages nodal development with different housing types integrated either through vertical or horizontal mixed use. And then inconsistent policies here would be the conditional use district consistency, and that's being flagged just because of the condition that prohibits apartment types. That's kind of inconsistent with the community mixed use land use designation. And then this is also in an area of fire service concern. So again, it is not meeting the fire response times for the deployment of a second unit, and then the full deployment to a fire suppression incident. No outstanding issues with the petition, and your deadline for action is December 9th.
Thank you very much. Moving on to public comment, the applicant and those in favor have a total of 10 minutes to speak. And just so we get a sense, by show of hands, is anyone here to speak in opposition of this project? Looks like there are none. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Worth Mills with Longleaf Law Partners. For the sake of time, I'll jump ahead through these slides a little bit. So again, the current zoning, this property zoned R4, the area surrounding it zoned R10 conditional use. And as you get closer to the intersection, the zoning district and development intensities increase. These are the zoning conditions for the R10 CU property around us. You can see the prohibited uses, the residential caps, and the prohibition on apartment building types. All but condition 2 we have incorporated into our rezoning. And again, the purpose of this is to create a consistent zoning district with the Chapel Towns subdivision that was approved earlier this year. And you can see here, this is our site, and the balance around us has been approved for that townhouse subdivision. And as you get closer to the intersection, there are approved apartments and there are approved commercial space as you get right towards that intersection. Again, the future land use map recommends community mixed use. We think that because we're increasing the development intensity to townhouses compatible with what's around us, that we are consistent with the future land use map designation. And here are the conditions that we've added. Again, the same prohibited uses, prohibiting the apartment building type, and limiting individual townhouse buildings to no more than 7 dwelling units. So the request is compatible with the approved development plans nearby. It's consistent with the future land use map and consistent with the comprehensive plan. Happy to go back through any of those slides and answer questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak in support? Seeing none, the opposition has a total of 10 minutes to speak. And seeing none, we'll bring it back to the table for questions and comments from the commissioners. Any thoughts here? Perhaps? No? Well, then with that, I will note that it's already surrounded by the R10, and along with the other issues about the fire safety issues we've addressed, We know that the fire master plan RFP is currently issued, and we'll have responses by the end of the year, and hopefully that will continue to address a number of the concerns in these surrounding areas. And with that, I'll entertain a motion. Vice Chair Reins.
For zoning case Z37-2023, I move to recommend adoption of the proposed consistency statement dated October 10th, 2023, containing the agenda materials, and to recommend approval of the zoning amendment.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Commissioner Bennett has seconded. By show of hands, all those in favor? All those opposed? That motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to approval of the minutes. We have 3 items, 3 batches of minutes to approve today. Are there any comments or questions about any of these minutes? Seeing none, I'd like to make, Commissioner Bennett. Yes.
Trying to pull it up. On the Infrastructure and Mobility Committee meeting, the very last sentence about discussion about the possibility to create a workforce, could we amend that, the possibility, I think it was around workforce development initiative for the construction of green stormwater infrastructure.
Okay.
And that's the only.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Then seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve all 3 sets of minutes with that one change to item G2. Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Otwell has seconded. All those in favor by show of hands? Any opposed? That motion passes 6-0. Moving on to other business, report from the chair. I'll only report that we got through the agenda. Thank you very much to everyone for being efficient today. And moving on to report from the members. And if folks, committee chairs could also discuss their committee meetings this month, that would be great.
Thanks, Chair Miller. For the next Planning Commission Committee of the Whole, I have it on my calendar to be Thursday, October 26th, in room 305. We do not have any other special meetings scheduled for this month.
And we don't have any items currently that we're expecting on the 26th, so it's very likely that we will not meet.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Hare?
No report.
Commissioner Bennett?
We don't have any items for infrastructure and mobility for this month. Is that correct, Bynum?
That's correct.
Okay, so we won't be meeting this month.
Thank you. Commissioner Fox?
There is no text change committee meeting scheduled for this month.
Commissioner Otwell?
No report.
Thank you very much. Strategic planning, is there a meeting scheduled this month?
No, but I have talked with the chair, and we are going to try to meet in November to take up this affordable housing location policy discussion. We do need a quorum of 3. Mr. Mann has indicated he's available. We would need 2 of Commissioners Bennett, Lampman, McCrimmon, and Peeler. And we don't have enough of those people today here to know if we would have a quorum. We can definitely work on that between now and the next meeting to confirm.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And moving on to the report of the Assistant Director.
The only thing I wanted to mention is that we do have a retreat scheduled for Tuesday, the 31st, Halloween. Shanitha has made arrangements for refreshments for you all. I would love to hear your thoughts about an agenda if you would be in touch with the Chair Miller about what you want to discuss, review, so we can prepare as needed.
Yes, thank you. If anyone has those items and want to call me or send an email on specific items that we may want to address, that would be great. If you could do it maybe this within the next week or so, that would give me enough time to compile that and hand it over to staff.
Are we dressing up? You are?
Full costume required.
I plan to bring my witch hat.
Nice.
Just for my knowledge, has there been topics already that are, okay. So nothing's been said, okay.
Traditionally, we sort of look at the amount of cases that we've handled and some of the efficiency of the commission, but I think that there's an opportunity to potentially look at other items too. So very interested in what others have to say about that.
I would also note preservation staff will be here at our next meeting to provide an informational presentation as a follow-up to your previous retreat.
Thank you.
A little slow moving on all fronts there, but we will get that done before the next retreat.
Okay.
Getting it under the wire.
Any other comments from the assistant director? Okay, well, thank you very much. In that case, we are adjourned 5 minutes early.
Way to go. Coming in hot, leaving hot.